My name's Kresse. I'm an environmental entrepreneur. I've been doing environmental business projects since 2002, and I'm here to really talk about ECO, which is the social enterprise that I've built since being in the UK. I think that the concept behind the series tonight was this financial meltdown, and I really hate the word meltdown because that's like the end of the world meltdown, and I think we need to have some perspective on that. The way I see it is actually quite simple. You have your parents, and they go away for the weekend, and you have the kids that stay at home, and they decide to have a big party and burn the house down. And that's really what I think has kind of happened. And everybody had a choice in that. You know, we decided not to regulate, and you know, that was the choice of the parents. We decided not to learn from Enron, and that was the choice of the parents. And the choice of the kids was to have this big party and to go, you know, completely mad and be really irresponsible. But equally, I think the point that's sort of missed is that these kids had a choice, and you could have had a party, or you could have done your homework. You could have had sort of this short-term gain, or you could have had a sort of a long-term goal. You could have had real value. But instead you got this sort of perceived value, or this, you know, short-term gain. Let's see if I do this. Is it up, down? That one? I went to a lecture a couple of years ago before I started ECO, and it was really fascinating to me. I've always been obsessed with waste. I hang out in landfills and at tips, and I sort of have this really great story. When I was a kid, my dad used to take me to the dump, and that was actually quite a treat to get to go there. And I lived in the prairies of Canada, so we didn't have the sea, and the dump was where I first saw seagulls or heard seagulls. So when I live on the coast here in Britain now, and that sound of the seagulls, it sort of takes me back to my days at the dump, and it's all very nostalgic and everything. But I went to a lecture here, and it was by a guy called Michael Braungart. I don't know if many of you have read Cradle to Cradle. But the concept in his book is that you should really only have two elements that you design everything from. You should have your biological elements, and you should have your technical elements. So everything should be permanently recyclable. And this is great. This is fantastic, okay? Because if we have a society that does that with everything that it makes and produces, then we're going to support the planet. We're going to support people through all of our activities. And once you've got that product, his point was, why think about reducing your footprint? You know, why think about doing it in a small scale? The point is that you should go crazy. You should really go for it. Be at scale. So the point of this slide is really to say that you've got to make a big footprint. Once you get things right, you should do it in a big way. You shouldn't have an idea that you keep to one hub. You should have 50. You should have 1,000. And that's what I think where social enterprise is going. Everybody has to pick their passion. My passion is a problem, and that problem is waste. In this country, I think, what was this, 2006, these stats are from, there was 225 million tons of waste produced in Britain, or what people classify as waste, and 99 million tons of that went to landfill. I think my problem with landfill is that if you try to describe it to a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old, they'll just say, well, that's like making a mess and shoving it under the bed, you know. And then you try to explain that that's their parents' solution to the waste problem. And you know, it doesn't really go over very well. So my solution is ECO, is the business that I've created, is to deal with a waste problem. Specifically, we deal with pernicious wastes. None of the things here look like waste. This is one of my bags. It's made from 25-year-old decommissioned fire hose. In London, when you use fire hose and it goes through a fire, sometimes it gets, you know, scraped up, cut like a bike tire. Sometimes there's a puncture you can't repair, or it goes to the end of its 25-year life and they can't actually use it anymore for health and safety reasons. And what they were doing when I met them was sending that waste to landfill, which was sort of abhorrent to me. So I started collecting it and put it in my sort of maybe eventually to be parents-in-law's barn. And they're really nice people with a barn, and now it's filled with fire hose. But we didn't know what to do with it. I just knew that it was too beautiful to throw away, and I really saw beauty in the hose. There isn't enough hose for me to make products for Primark. There's enough hose for me to make a luxury brand, and that was really why we set up Eco. We'd read this report by the WWF called Deeper Luxury. It was an analysis of the luxury industry. They looked at brands like Louis Vuitton, they looked at Cartier and Tiffany, and nobody got higher than a C+ in terms of their ethical and environmental performance. Nobody. And why is that? You know, they've got the highest margins in the business, of any business, and they're not doing anything exciting or interesting with that money. So we decided to, you know, take this hose and compete at that level. So this is just a description of Eco and the brand, and shows you our first 4 products that we made. The next phase for us in building a social enterprise was really to take the idea of reclaiming the waste and go then one step further. We donate half of our profits to the firefighters' charity from the fire hose line. So every single waste stream that I collect, there is a charity that I have in mind. There is a group that I want to work with. There's a project, an initiative that I want to support. The luxury industry, as I said, has incredibly high margins. It isn't difficult for me to give 50% of my profits away. It wouldn't be difficult for Shell to do it either. So we, in the UK, give half of our profits to the firefighters' charity, which is an incredibly exciting charity that supports active and retired fire service personnel, looks after people who've been injured in fires, looks after people who've been traumatized by their experience, and helps both the firefighters and their families. So you move on then to, let's call it waste stream number 2. This is a project that's actually ongoing with Sainsbury's. We are a luxury brand, but just like Anya Hindmarsh did her bag with Sainsbury's, I thought, you know, that's not such a bad idea. We started reclaiming jute coffee sacks. There is 4,000 tons of this waste coming into the UK every year in the form of about 4 to 6 million coffee sacks. They're 70-kilo sacks. They come into the various roasteries, and then 90% of that is going to landfill. Now, this really doesn't make any sense at all because it's food-grade jute, it's totally compostable, it's got enormous value, and it's going to landfill. So we started collecting that. And this is just a diagram. This was actually the diagram I used for Sainsbury's to spell out the process to them, to show them that it actually would be very easy for them to effectively use their own waste to make money. So I collect the sacks, I remanufacture them in the UK. It's the only reusable shopper that's actually manufactured in the UK. And then we sell it at Sainsbury's. And 50% of the profits from this project go back to the same coffee growers, okay? So I work with Betty's and Taylor's. Yorkshire Tea also has this coffee brand called Taylor's. I don't know if any of you know it. It's sold in Sainsbury's. I collect 100% of Taylor's coffee sack waste. We reclaim them and make them into these sacks. And then we work with Taylor's on one particular plantation in Nicaragua called Jesus Maria, which was their worst performing plantation in terms of Rainforest Alliance certification. And we helped that plantation to get up to standard by improving sanitation and things like that. And that's all by people buying a reusable shopper made out of reclaimed waste in the UK. And that's completing the circle, I think.